Hello, my name is Margaret Graziano, and today we are discussing elevating your influence to impact positive change. So we are recording this. So if you missed it, you will get this in your email and you will see exactly what we covered. In the last 4 years, my organization has been inundated with people in organizations and leaders and teams saying, how do we deal with all of this change headed our way? And that's what this webinar is about. How do we deal with that change? And how do we elevate our ability to impact? So this webinar is based on a book called Leadership and Self-Deception. Leadership and Self-Deception is an excellent self-awareness book about how we compromise what we know to do, how we second guess ourselves in those impulses that we have to serve or get things done or follow up with people or reach out to someone. And so self-deception is when we have this impulse to do the right thing, but we do what our survival mechanism tells us to do instead. So I highly recommend that you look at the video on YouTube of leadership and self-deception after this webinar. So we work with culture. Before 4 years ago, before COVID, the majority of the work that we had was around helping leaders and organizations get into the performance catalyst quadrant around culture. The performance catalyst quadrant is high support, high challenge. This is when people feel like they can operate in engagement. They feel like they're fully supported, not just with the workload, but with the level and the depth of work, and that they get the training they need, and that they have the tools and resources, and that the people giving them work understand the depth and breadth and the complexity of everything that they're doing. However, when people don't feel supported, when they feel that they're in over their head, when they don't have the resources, when they don't have the right people on the team or the right budget, or the workload is just scaling out of control and there's no, hey, I need help, or hey, I need to say no, then they move into fear and self-protection. They don't want to be fired. They don't want to seem like they're incompetent or helpless. And so they put up their defense mechanisms. And this is not a great place to be. What happens to people in the bottom of the quadrant when they're working in fear and self-protection is there's a lot of manipulation. There's a lot of coercion and people politicking for their own self. And so they remove themselves from what was formerly perceived as a community, and they're out for their own protection. And either they get angry, frustrated, or they get anxious and scared. And neither of those behaviors or moods or ways of being are effective. As a matter of fact, when you're in frustration, angry, pissed off, upset, agitated, annoyed, you can only be effective 25% of the time. When you're in fear, anxiety and craving take over you, and you're pushing away what you don't want or hoping to have something different. So you're not in the present. You can only be effective 10% of the time. However, when you're above the line in courage or in engagement, which we'll get into in a later slide, or in innovation, or in synchronicity, you're catalyzing change. You're working with other people. You're highly motivated, inspired, connected to your highest purpose. And you could see solutions where when you're below the line, you're kind of like cloistered in and in self-protection mode. So when we work with organizations and they do an ideal culture survey, so they say to us, something's off. We have all these changes taking place. We need your support in helping us catalyze people to catalyze change. One of the first things that we'll suggest is that they do a diagnostic Actually, sound and current data is the second discipline of healthy, intentional, planned change. So when they give the first part of this data collection survey, they ask people, what is an ideal culture? And 95% of the survey participants come back and say, I want a high achievement organization. I want an organization where people are self-actualized. They can be everything they think they can, and they can really experience themselves as a full contribution at work, where people are treated humanistic. We care. We give them the opportunity to say, no, I can't get that done right now. I'll renegotiate. Let's have a different date. Where we have offerings to help people manage themselves, like technology or training on how to be more productive, or training on how to not get distracted, or coaching on best practices. Do this, don't do that, because we're committed to you succeeding, not surviving, or thriving and not surviving. And the fourth element that people say they want is affiliative. They want to be able to work with people from different parts of the organization at different role levels, and they want to know they can learn from people and be mentored and cross-mentoring. What they say they don't want is aggressive defensive, which is highly perfectionistic, highly competitive, high power, control, and opposition. In these red environments, there is no freedom, there is no creativity. They also say they don't want to be in a passive company. I mean, let's face it, we are currently working and living in one of the most volatile, uncertain, chaotic, complex, ambiguous times in history. The world is coming at us at about 140,000 bits of information a day, mostly not such good news, but lots of information, and the human brain can only hold on to 120 of those 140,000 bits. So we all have cognitive overload and cognitive scattering, and that's not what people want. When given the choice, they want healthy, intentional, or as this survey says, constructive culture. But here's 2 weeks later, when they do the second survey, and this isn't just one company or two companies, this is thousands. People come back and say, we don't have enough of this. We're not celebrating successes. We don't even know really where the mark is. My role doesn't have performance metrics. I don't know how my role contributes to the overall organization's success. I don't feel like I'm part of a team where they know me and care about me. And I certainly don't feel like I'm being mentored and cross-trained, or anybody's giving my development any time or attention. And so survey says what they have, though, is high aggressive defensive and high passive defensive. Why this is important in leadership self-deception is I have never had one client outside of people in HR. So if you're in HR, you actually already intuitively know this is going on, but I've never had one person in the C-suite see that this is a problem. They can't see it because they know that if we're aggressive, if we're operating tough and we're getting things done, then we're moving the ball forward. But what they often don't see is that aggressive and defensive style, when they're in full gear, they compromise the rest of the organization. They throw people into a state of survival and fear. And if they can't see it, and they can't see that they can't see it, it's called a blind spot. So this is why I love using surveys. If you know anything about my book, Ignite Culture, or if you have been on our website, Keen Alignment, we offer free surveys all the time because we know that people need sound and current data. If you haven't taken those surveys, take advantage of those surveys. You can give it to as many people as you want, but it's data that you can then say, what's really going on? Those are free. This is not free. The surveys cost, depending on how many people you have, between 10 and 20 grand. And beyond getting the visuals, it also gives you an entire framework for this is what people want. Here's how to get there. Although if I had my druthers, I would change the model, and I'll show you later. And then this is what you currently have. And then it will tell you which levels of the organization are compromised, which departments, which divisions. Is it the senior level people? Is it people that just started? Like, where are people at? And where do I go to work? As a leader, you've got to know what's going on with you. In other words, put your own oxygen mask on, but you also have to know what's going on with other people in the organization. So it is said, and I believe it because I work in this business and I've seen transformation occur time and time again, whether you're a solo person who understands your own calling in life, or you're a person who works for a company and you understand their noble cause and you're connected to it. You want to make the difference that that company wants to make. And you could see yourself self-actualizing as you work with them. You could see yourself move closer to your long-term goals. You will be more likely to fully engage. So the mission, or what we call the noble cause, and the management philosophy makes the biggest difference in getting people to live and work legitimately and in integrity in an ideal culture. Now, what you need for that to happen is a lot of architecture. All of this is architecture, structures, systems, technology, design, and skills. But what this model is missing is the environment. How do I create an environment that is ripe for change to occur, that is ripe for people to evolve, that is ripe for people to come together and commit to the same things for a bigger purpose, individually and collectively? So at the individual level, what people need to evolve is they need self-awareness. They need self-control. They need personal accountability and a desire to get better. They need to see that working for you and doing what you're doing and what they're doing is going to get them somewhere in life. They need to understand how to behave in a team, how to treat each other, how to respond rather than react when things don't go your way. They need to learn how to problem solve at the group level, how to intervene, how to call a time out. They need to know how to communicate an upset versus pretending that there's artificial harmony, or said even better than that, cordial hypocrisy. Then they need to take it out at the organizational level and say, how do we get all of these people to tap into their collective intelligence and affiliate and collaborate and innovate together? So change, evolution, and self-deception go hand in hand, because if we have blind spots, we can't see what we need to see and we can't accomplish who we need to be to make things happen. In this survey that I told you costs between $10,000 and $20,000, I like to tell people that because they should know when I'm giving a tool, what does it cost to do something? And that also depends on the size company you have. But you're going to look, if you do this survey, at all the levers, you're going to get a list of 29 to 50 things that you could switch in different directions to change the outcome. But what we'll say in a very simple way is it all begins with the overall intent of the organization. What is the noble cause? Then what is the behaviors, the values, how we treat each other? How do we say we want it to go here? What's the environment we're creating? And then we look at the architecture. In the world of organizational effectiveness, organizational design, organizational development, they focus a lot on architecture, not so much on environment. And even in the world of mission, vision, and values, they don't focus so much on how do we make those come alive in how people treat each other. Well, it all begins with the leader from within, being awake and aware to what is, awake and aware to where strengths are, awake and aware to our gaps, and awake and aware to our impact on others. So these 4 elements to a healthy, high-performance organizational culture. Humanistic is, I feel cared for, I care for others, I know what's important to people, I want to set them up to win, they want to win, and they want to set me up to win. It is not employer has to caretake the employees, it's mutually synergistically a cooperative relationship. And we're seeing more and more of this as the world changes. Affiliative, as I said before, but I'll say it again, this I get to work with other people of a different skill set. I get to learn about people at different levels. I get to communicate and problem solve with my peers and with my peers' bosses. And I get to contribute in areas in the company that I know best so that we don't have to keep solving the same old problem. I get to self-actualize. I get to be my highest and best self at work. I get to contribute. I get to see and experience and feel that I am growing, that I am becoming something. People want that. They're desperate for it. And even if you're on this call, and if you were on the last week's call about burnout, when we don't feel we're self-actualized, when we feel we're doing work that isn't moving us forward intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, we check out, we get bored. And achievement, we've got to know we're winning. We've got to know what's working and what should I do more of and what's not working and what should I do less of. So people have 4 fundamental needs. Now, this is not life needs. These are emotional needs. They have to feel like they belong, like they're significant, like they matter in the organization. They have to feel like they're valued, like they're significant. Um, what they're doing matters. John Deere, a company out in I think Iowa, but Midwest and now all over the world, because they've got tech centers everywhere. They ask one question on their pulse survey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much value do you feel you brought to the organization? If anybody in the last 2 weeks, if anybody answers below a 7, they have a one-on-one to find out why they don't feel fully utilized. So belonging, I matter. I fit here. I'm important. Valued, what I do matters. I contribute to the noble cause. Self-actualization, I'm working to my highest and best. I'm using my highest level of intelligence and I'm fulfilling your destiny and mine. Contribution, I'm working outside of my normal role to make the organization better. Believe it or not, people want to do that if they see what's in it for them and what's in it for their career. Unfortunately, a lot of the people running companies don't always know how to bring these messages down grassroots, so people don't always see that they belong, that they're valued, that they can actualize at work, and that they're a contribution. Belonging includes who you invite in meetings and why. Are they there to make it look good, or are they there to really contribute? Do you ask the right people for the feedback when there's problems, or do we go to the same old people who might keep creating more problems, but because they're always with their hand raised or want to get involved, that we keep asking them for solutions? So personal blind spots. So when it comes to leadership and self-deception, ask yourself the question, what do you know about yourself that really works? What are your strengths? Where do you hit the finish line and nobody can compete with you? What makes you special in the work you're doing? Are you more left hemisphere? Are you more right hemisphere? More logical, more creative? Where do you bring that creativity to work? And make a list. And if you're going to do the list of strengths, which you ought to do anyway if you're ever interviewing internally or externally, on the other side of the ledger is, where do I need development? Where aren't I living up to standards? Where does it take extra effort for someone to manage me or follow up with me or chase me down? Or where do I hold myself back? Where don't I say no? Where do I have no boundaries? And I'm always saying, I'll do that, or I'm the one raising my hand to do all those special projects. Maybe your blind spots are around delegation. Blind spots could be around a person at the office who's creating some havoc and not really getting their work done, or getting work done, but leaving a lot of dead bodies or a lot of dead hearts along the way. So make your list of your strengths and weaknesses. It's really important. Now, there's 2 kinds of self-awareness. There's internal self-awareness and there's external self-awareness. The second thing to do is ask others, what works about me as a leader? And what doesn't work about me as a leader? Where do you see I need to develop my muscle in my job? How could I make a bigger contribution here? Being curious is the best step. Now, second area of this is when I'm working with others, where do I fall down? Where am I too passive? Where am I too aggressive? Where don't I ask the right questions? Where am I too ambiguous? Where am I causing volatility, uncertainty, chaos, complexity, confusion? If you take the time to ask and time to journal, you'll get your answers. And then again, ask other people. Where are my strengths with others? Where do I need to improve when working with others? So there's what you know and what you know you know. Those are the lists that you can write down yourself. There's what you know that you don't know, and this is where you might know your weaknesses. What I know doesn't work is I travel all the time and I don't always follow up with people, or I don't follow up enough, or I follow up too much, or I don't mandate that people use their project managing software. But then there's what we don't know that we don't know, and we don't even know we don't know it. That's your blind spots. That's your opportunity for growth. The only way to learn that is to get really curious and be really open to ask and to get feedback. So I talked earlier about 140,000 bits of information just spewing at people all day long. And the awareness of the average person can only take 120. If you do the math on that, I think it's less than 1%. When I talk to CEOs about these numbers, they're flabbergasted. And almost all of them in the last 2 weeks, I've spoke to about up to 60 CEOs as of today. And then I have a group tomorrow and a group the next day. 98% of them said we're giving too many projects and expecting them to be done too fast. But if they have a blind spot and they don't understand that 140,000 bits of information, and they don't understand cognitive scattering and cognitive overload, and they don't understand what being in flow and operating at peak is, their ideas are always going to be urgent and always going to be important, and they're always going to have to be implemented right now because they can't see what they can't see, and they can't even see it. Because for them, they could do 80 things at a time. But the average person doesn't operate at the same cadence or pace or sequencing of a CEO. And so we have to teach them, which is why I wrote my book. And in the whole second chapter, I say, if there's a problem, it begins with you. Now, a lot of people read that book that aren't CEOs, and it's the same for anybody reading. Any problem going on around you, instead of pointing the finger outside, look, where am I being self-deceptive? Where am I causing these problems? So the average person not only has all that stuff coming at them, if you're healthy, adult, emotionally well, you will have between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day. The problem with those thoughts is 85% of them are negative and repetitive. So people are spinning out. They're overloaded from text messaging, email, TV, news, radio, flash messages on their phone, news, this, that, friends calling, this is wrong, that's wrong. And then they have that externally, and then they have internal. So the average person has almost no space to learn and grow and be present. So part of self-deception is not addressing that those of you on this call and those of you listening in the future or watching in the future, you have 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day, and 85% of them are negative and repetitive. What are you doing to tame all those thoughts, to settle those thoughts into some peace? Because we need to do that in order to think straight. If you have all those thoughts coming at you, all those pieces of information, and then your thoughts are just churning, you have what we call a wall of thought. You could put your thoughts in here. You're 85% negative and repetitive. Oh, I don't know the answer to that. Oh, I have to do this so they like me. Oh, I can't say no. Oh, I don't know the answer. I'm not sure it's right, so I'm not going to say anything. Oh, I have a really good idea, but they might not like it, so I won't give it to them. Well, I don't have a degree in that and everybody else does, so I'm not going to contribute. Oh, they didn't ask me to be in that meeting. I really think I should be in that meeting, but they didn't ask me, so they don't want me. All of those thoughts will stop us from acting. Now, what if you work with 4 people and you all have walls of thought? Can you imagine? This is what leads people to burnout. This is what leads people to not communicate or over communicate or get so overwhelmed during the day they can't get productive. And what we want, people feel best when they're productive. They feel best when their work is producing great results. They feel best when they're doing work that leads them somewhere in the future. So we have to get around this wall of thought. And we have to look at what our barriers are to growth. This slide says advancement, but I say to growth and even change. One is internal barriers and one is external barriers. External barriers are things that the organization has put in the way that are now constraints. And I promise you, if they knew they were constraints, they would remove them. But maybe the internal barriers are not communicating in a way that can be heard, so the external barriers could be taken away. I used to be the kind of leader that would have 37 programs I was trying to promote at once, and and all my ideas I wanted to be in fruition. And now I ask, like, can you really get that done? And I ask people, what failed? We didn't have enough time. We didn't have enough focus. So we changed the way we're doing things. But if you're the one hiring people and you're spending gobs of money to hire and pay people, the last thing you want people to be doing is having barriers to progress, barriers to evolution, barriers to advancement, barriers to growth and development. So we have to look at what can I own in my barriers and what can I look at outside of me in this environment that I'm working in that are barriers. So when you look at self-deception, where does self-doubt deceive you? If you're leading change, if you're navigating change, if you're moving an initiative forward, where does self-doubt take you hostage? There's 3 forms of self-doubt: the imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and having to be the expert, having to have all the answers, having to know that what you're going to say is the right thing before you say it. I think we all know what imposter syndrome is, but this is, why am I here? Why did they ask me? I didn't earn this. They're better than me, and all that other self-talk. Here's some common statements of self-doubt. I'm not smart enough. I'm too young. I'm too old. My accent's too thick. I don't have enough experience. I have no value to add. What if I'm wrong? Everyone will find out that I don't really know what the heck I'm doing. And maybe I'm not good enough. Common self-doubt behaviors, how this shows up in the workplace, is manning up. Now, manning up, we use that word in a lot of our women's leadership programs, but manning up is powering up, getting things done, bucking up, buttercup, and not really dealing with what I need to deal with before I go get it done. We want people to get things done, but if you do it out of force versus doing it out of power, you'll leave a lot of people disenfranchised. Holding back, not saying what you need to say, having cordial hypocrisy or artificial harmony, holding yourself back, not saying what you want to say, giving up. Just, I'm not even going to try. Second guessing yourself and others, using manipulation to get what you want, colluding, gossiping, talking about everything that's not working at work, but not talking about it with the right people, talking about it with each other instead of doing something about it. What does this say? Suppressing? I can't read this. That is a typo. Suppressing guide? Get us? Well, that's a mistake. I'm sorry. Making excuses. It must be suppressing guidance or something. So we have a program coming up where we work with people on this evolution of the leader within so that they can deal with all that self-doubt, that self-incrimination, that curiosity that they have suppressed, and it's called Evolve the Leader Within. If you're curious about it, scan the QR code. You can learn about it. It's an 8-week program, 2 hours of training every week for 8 weeks, followed up with coaching, and it goes for 8 weeks. And I think it's under $300. So it's a steal. The other thing about this program is you do way more than learn about self-deception. That's only 2 modules. You create a vision for your life, you create a plan, you create the architecture, you create the environment of everything you need to live and lead on purpose. The other thing I wanted to say is that we have never done this program outside of our corporate clients. This is our first public program. This group is a group of women from the same company that all went through our leadership program. But normally our events are sponsored by companies, and only the people who work for them come. So the other thing you learn when you're looking at self-deception is, what are your organization's blind spots? How many big, bolder projects is your organization taking on right now as change efforts? And how many of them have tight deadlines? And how many of the same people are working on them? And how much of your organization's intellectual capital are you tapping into to have these big projects move faster? Or is it the same old finite resources that you're using? Make a list of where you think your organization has system-wide blind spots. Some tips on that is, where do you have the same problems creeping up over and over again? I have a client right now. I love them. They're a really great group of people, but they have 2 leadership levels in their company. Well, 3. They have manager, director, and vice president. They have a ton of directors, but no place for those directors to go. And they don't want very many vice presidents. So they have a whole lot of people who are like waiting for someone to retire, and they need to create more opportunities for growth. Maybe not more hierarchy, but more widespread opportunities for people to expand their capacity. That's been a blind spot for them. And I have another client that I work with that everyone on their executive team is a man. And every time they try to hire a woman, she fails, because they're not hiring a woman out of the industry to understand the industry. So instead of the woman stepping up and being a real powerful leader, they're coming and saying, you guys are too rough, and you're too hard, and you expect too much. And it's a construction industry. And so they have a blind spot about, you need somebody from your industry, or you need to promote from within. But hiring someone from the outside who knows nothing about this business hasn't worked too well for you. And I could give you a litany of other blind spots, but mostly it's too much work, not enough time to make change happen. And it's the same people involved in all the same projects and not tapping into the collective. And then it's not understanding who you really are as an organization, what your environment is, and the kind of people that need to come in and lead or get promoted and lead. So some external barriers are systemic bias. So in some companies, the workplace wasn't designed for women, like the construction company I just talked about. And so they don't even consider how to make things work for that empathetic, whole systems thinker. They're all about getting the work done. But then it doesn't get done right, and it doesn't get done in a collectivity or in a community. And so we create this aggressive defensive culture. Most male-dominated industries, organizations, you will see aggressive defensive. If you have a feminine, female dominated, or female energy, or masculine energy with the male dominated, if you have a feminine dominated, female dominated industry or organization that is run by women, you will see a lot of, unfortunately, passive defensive. So really empathetic, really loving, but maybe erroring on the side of accountability and results. When you have an integrated organization, you have both masculine and feminine, which some masculine tendencies are accountability, producing results, getting shit done, high deadlines, lots of goals. Some feminine tendencies or behaviors is we ask people's opinion. We give people a lot of support. We include people in the things that they should be included in. We're patient before we run to the finish line. We have a plan. And so we want the best of both worlds. But this is not the only barrier. It's just a barrier we're dealing with right now in most organizations. So, what's important to break down that self-deception is building trust first with yourself and then with others. You have to be able to look at the person in the mirror. That's the second or the third chapter of my book, and be able to really love who you're looking at and believe in that person and tap that person on the back. You're doing a good job, because other people aren't going to do it for you. It's rare. But you also, if you can love yourself, like yourself, trust yourself, you can give that to other people. You've got to be inclusive of what your needs are and inclusive of what your team's needs are. And then opportunities for collaboration. A lot of people, when they hear me say this, they're like, well, Maji, we're doing team building. We did trust falls. I'm not really talking about that. That's a small piece of it. Even in our retreats, when we do deep alignment retreats, which I'm doing one next week and one the week after, yes, we do things that build trust and we do collaboration and team building, but that's not all we do. We really go deep to blow up or level set this cordial hypocrisy and this artificial harmony so that we can build trust. You cannot build trust on a faulty bedrock of we tell people things that aren't true, or we make promises we don't keep, or we don't tell people when it's not working. So these three, building trust, inclusivity, and collaboration, are key to ending self-deception. So the 7 levels of personal, group, and organizational effectiveness, I shared this earlier, but now we'll go deep into it. Remember the quadrant, culture quadrant was up here on the right side, high support, high challenge. You need courage, engagement, innovation, and synchronicity to be in the culture quadrant, to the culture catalyst quadrant, which I might as well say change quadrant. We're evolving so we can lead change and bring others with us, and we can eliminate or mitigate burnout, aggravation, friction in the workplace. Because that friction that we have to deal with at work, we bring it home to ourselves and the people we live with. If we have a group that is in self-protection because they don't feel supported, or we have too many initiatives and too many priorities, and we're not disciplining ourselves to be discerning and to prioritize the priorities, people are going to be thrown in fear, frustration, and hopelessness. In hopelessness, we have given up all positive thought about things ever getting better. In hopelessness, we can only operate in effectiveness 5% of the time. In hopelessness, if we last there too long, it leads to depression. So our mood could be resigned, cynical. Oh my God, we're doing this again. This is never going to work. These people are nuts. If we stay there too long, we go into despair and depression. If we stay there too long, next thing you know, we're medicating, or we have to see our therapist. We have to interrupt ourselves if we can when we're in hopelessness, or we have to ask for help. And if you really can't stand the place you're working, and if they bring you into hopelessness all the time, or if it's just not the right job, then you shouldn't be there, or you should renegotiate your work circumstances or the work that you'll work on. I won't do this. I can't do this. I can't do that, but I will do this. I will work on this. If there's not enough work for you to just work on that, then go part-time, but don't allow yourself to unravel because of a job. Fear. People can only be in effectiveness 10% of the time while they're in fear. When you are in fear, your body is experiencing high levels of adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine. Now, we need those things to get off the couch. Otherwise, we just sit there like a blob. But when they're in high doses, they attack our critical thinker, our prefrontal cortex. They dumb us down. They attack our heart and our internal organs, and they make us sick. When the body is in a state of fear and frustration or even hopelessness, The body's autonomic nervous system puts you into a state of inflammation. It thinks it's protecting you from almost certain attack or loss, like a saber-toothed tiger, but maybe you're just afraid you're going to get laid off. Or maybe you're afraid your boss gave you a big project, or you're operating outside of your comfort zone and your internal, that 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day is going crazy and bringing you down. But it's important that you recognize this in yourself first, because when you recognize it in yourself, you can recognize it in others. When we are in a state of fear, we close ourselves off, we block ourselves off, and we protect, protect, protect. We are resisting people, and we are resisting circumstances, and we're praying for something better or hoping for something better, but we're not effective. When we're in frustration, we are annoyed to the max. We are agitated, aggravated, annoyed, frustrated, pissed off, upset, complaining, blaming, shaming. We're not too nice. We're aggressive, defensive, and we are only effective 25% of the time, which means we are leaving our happiness, our joy, our fulfillment, our self-actualization, our love of life on the table. And I don't know about you, but I'm in my 50s, and I'll tell you, it went in a minute. It went in a minute. My life, before my eyes, my kids were grown. And if I could go back, I would do things differently. I wouldn't trade in who I am now and all my learning, but I wouldn't work as much as I worked when my kids were little. I was living in frustration because I needed to support them. And I was working for a group of people who you had to raise your hand to go to the bathroom. You couldn't socialize with each other. We were on straight commission, and we were told if we didn't make a placement every week, we were on the chopping block. Could you imagine living like that? I can't anymore and never would. I think it's why I travel so much and vacation so much now, because I'm making up for lost time. But I work with so many organizations that the employees tell me this is where they're at. They're in friction with people. There's arguing. Well, that drains people of their vital life energy. And then guess what? They can't give you everything you want. When I tell CEOs this, they're like, huh? I said, if you care about money, do the math, man. If you've got 100 people and they're only effective 25% of the time, what if you invested in getting everybody up into courage? By the way, when you're in courage, you're effective 65% of the time. You have a belief in a future that is going to happen. You don't know how, but you believe it, you see it, you can taste it, and you're willing to go forward and plan. My girlfriend just planned a big trip for us to do 3 massive hikes in Yosemite. Like, I'm talking about 3,500 vertical, gain 13 miles each way. That's 26 miles in a day. And she laid it all out, and I was like, holy cow, can I do this? And then I remembered how I was when I was doing the Camino. I wanted to do the Camino. I knew I had to some days do 22 miles, 24 miles. And I signed up for it in a state of courage. And then I got really fearful, almost hopeless, started going off the rails with these thoughts about me being on the side of the road, panicked and bloody feet. And then I just caught and pulled myself back up and said, back into courage. And I did that Camino. I did it in 15 days, and I walked 200 miles. And some days I walked 26 miles. So I can do Yosemite, and I'm going to be doing it with friends. But courage is, I don't know how, but I know I will. When you're in an organization, if you're working on a change project, if you're working on a culture revolution, whatever you're working on that is taking people from below the line, above the line, or implementing some big innovation changes, you can't take people where you want them to go when they're in frustration. They will resist, they will kick, scream, they will gossip, they will point the finger, they will blame, they will be victims, and you won't be able to move them off the mark. You have to get them into a state of courage. So earlier I talked about intent, your vision for whatever you want people to do, your vision for what you want you to do. Me doing those 3 hikes in Yosemite, I picture myself up there with my best friend crying and hugging her, and like a lifelong memory. That's the vision that's bringing me into the future. whether it's your personal vision, or whether it's a vision for a project at work or an innovation or a vision for a whole department or a whole organization. It has to be big enough that you can feel it, taste it, feel the vibes, because when you really are there and you believe and you have hope and you lean in, you're 65% effective, which means you're approaching on this state of joy. In engagement, you are 79% effective. You believe in a future. You want to be part of that future. You see yourself in that future, and you're starting to engage and do things to bring that future to the present. You're all in. You're not thinking about what's in the way or what's limiting. You're thinking about what you can contribute. In innovation, you're at a 70, I'm sorry, engagement is 79, innovation is 89% effective. You're using your highest level of creativity, your highest level of thinking, of collaborating, of creating what's not been created yet. You're not looking at what you can't do, but looking at how can you do it. By the way, you've surpassed the state of joy in innovation. In the 6th level, you're vibrating at a 600 Hz, which means your energy is vibing high. People want to be around you. You're emitting positivity. And in engagement, you're at the 500s. Courage, you're at the 400s. What happens to your hormones, your chemicals in your body, is instead of being constricted and under attack, you're free. You've got serotonin. By the way, if your body doesn't make enough serotonin, causes depression. So if we know that serotonin is released when we're in courage, it's running, flowing through our body. Dopamine, the thing you get when you do runner's high. Endorphins. And oxytocin, that same feeling when you hold a brand new baby or your puppy. When those energies are running through you and expanding outside of you, you bring people with you and you expand your ability to see, be inclusive, hear, even get negative feedback, because you believe and you see and you're in the right mind space. We don't talk about it a lot in this webinar, but we do in our Evolve the Leader Within program. We are all energy, and we're either vibrating below the line or we're vibrating above the line. And if you knew better and you weren't in self-deception and you weren't operating in your subconscious programming, and you were awake and aware and self-aware and self-responsible, you would always choose joy, because you can. And part of our training in that Evolve Leader Within is we actually teach you how to transcend frustration, fear, and hopelessness and move into courage. And actually, I think the week of June 1st, we're offering free gifts to anybody that signs up for our webinars in the 2 weeks of June. And one of the books is Transcending Fear and Frustration. And it's exactly how to get into courage, engagement, and innovation. So right hemisphere, we've talked about this a little bit, but I'll go into more depth. When we are operating in our right hemisphere, we're tapping in to the right part of our brain, which is where freedom comes from. When we are operating above the power and freedom line, above here, courage, engagement, innovation, and synchronicity, we see the whole picture. We tap into our intuition. Our empathy is available to us. We understand metaphor, music, and poetry. We understand the meanings behind things, and we really see oneness, feel oneness, want to be part of an organization where everybody's focused on the same thing. Left hemisphere is where structure comes from. When we are above the line in courage, engagement, innovation, or synchronicity, the left hemisphere, the structure part of the brain, is where positivity comes from. It's where focus and direction comes from. It's where logic and analysis, sequencing, focusing on parts, being organized, having a project plan. I want you to know that without structure, there is no freedom. Without left hemisphere, and I work with people, I coach people for a living, and they say, I hate that left hemisphere. I just want to be in the right hemisphere. Well, there's no access to the right hemisphere because without left hemisphere, you're in chaos. And so part of our Evolve the Leader program is we give you structures to tap into both hemispheres more often than not, so you can lead and live in alignment. So really, when we are below the line, we are no longer driving our own car. We have given our power to our past, to some trigger, some projection from the past, some like they say in the Christmas Carol, some undigested, they say piece of beef, but undigested issue from the past, like with a parent or a boss, and we're projecting it onto the future. Often all of our projections, all of our triggers, all unresolved issues from the past happened before we're 7. And we just keep reliving it because we haven't learned the lesson yet. We haven't really dealt with it. So if that seems far out, do some research on it. Most of us are operating in our adult body with our really capable, wonderful brain, but we get triggered because we've got subconscious programming that is now triggering us, or is unresolved, or is some projection. So what's important for you is to shape an environment in your life for positive catalytic change. You want to be a change agent for you. If you do it for you, you can bring others with you. Then you want to shape your environment for positive change, not 18 initiatives at once. If you didn't see our webinar from last week, look at it, look for it on YouTube. It's about what leads to burnout and exhaustion, overwhelm. It's too much going on at once. And so you've got to learn, how do I build an environment that is conducive for positive, effective, healthy change for myself and others. Also having conversations that set the stage for action, not cordial hypocrisy. When you are leading a team of people through change, you have to set the context. We talked about this earlier. What's the intention? Is it inspiring? Is it noble enough? And does it attach to your big picture? What are everybody's commitments? Why are they in the room? Are they in the room because you felt obligated to invite them? Or are they in the room because you want them to participate in this change initiative? What are you going to talk about in the meeting or in the one-on-one? What does it look like to listen? Have people been trained in listening? We give this assessment. I don't know if we're offering it in this webinar. I should know that. I apologize. I'll find out in a few minutes. But anyway, we charge a lot of money, but sometimes I give it away for free. And it evaluates, how do you listen? Do you listen through bias, or do you listen through openness? Most people we invite into meetings, we don't tell them how to listen. We don't tell them what might be in their way of listening, and we don't give them an opportunity to get present in the room that they're in, having the meeting before we start the meeting. So halfway through the meeting, you want to stop the meeting and check in with everybody. What are you hearing? What's resonating? How can you apply it? And then you want to look at what we can do to move our conversation forward. And what, if you didn't get what I was saying, how can I improve what I was saying? So you do. At the end of the meeting, what are we walking away with? What were our lessons? Why are we doing this change initiative? What are we working on? How are we going to be working together? And then what is our follow-up? A lot of people delude themselves into thinking they're having really clear conversations, only to find out people don't remember saying yes. They don't remember what they said yes to, and they didn't do what they said they would do because they forgot, because we don't have this piece. So as far as being a positive influence for change, even if you're just looking at this saying, man, that's a lot of steps, all we're basically asking you to do is slow down so people can really understand what you're asking and what you need from them. Get a commitment about what you can count on people for, and then make sure you have a mutual understanding. That is so important when you're moving change forward. If you haven't read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, and you want to, it'll tell you everything that goes wrong when we're doing change. What our Evolve the Leader Within program allows you to do, and we even have a bigger one after that, but what allows you to do is ready yourself to be the kind of leader that can catalyze change with others. And every slide in here, we have a module for. So that is it for today. Thank you so much. If you want that transcending fear and frustration, pay attention to our emails. The week of June 1st, I believe, starting with May 29th. And then we also have a, Brennan, are you on? Can you say anything? Do you know what the second giveaway that we're giving is? I think he's
It's
on
a
mute.
visualization.
Oh, a visualization on your future, the kind of life you want to live. That's all for free. So please participate. If you want to follow me on YouTube, right here at Keen Alignment, or I thought it was Margaret Graziano. I wonder if this is true. You can follow me personally or professionally. I also have a Facebook, Margaret Graziano on Facebook. We look forward to continuing to support you. Thank you so much for coming, and we wish you the best. Bye-bye.